This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by ICOM. Heard it, worked it, logged it. Visit www.icomamerica.com/amateur for more information about ICOM radios.
It's Ham Radio. With Neil Rap, here we go. Welcome to Ham Talk Live. Call in, let's talk. Neil's your guy. Ham Talk Live, here we go on Ham Talk Radio.
Hey, good evening, everyone. It's time for Ham Talk Live. It's episode number 183. The hosts of So Now What, recorded live on Thursday, September 26, 2019. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Ham Talk Live. Tonight we're joined by Joe Carcia, NJ1Q, and Michelle Patnode, W3MVP. And we'll take your calls live in just a few minutes. Well, last week here on the show, Andy Maluzzi, KK4LWR, and Tony Maluzzi, KD8RTT, were here to talk about the Collegiate QSO Party. And if you missed the show, you can listen anytime at hamtalklive.com or on your favorite podcast app or over on YouTube, or you can catch the rebroadcast on WTWW. That's 5085 AM, Saturday evenings at about 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, do want to remind you that Fallout is coming up. It's Fallout season, and the third annual event is being held by the 100 Watts in a Wire podcast. That's 11th through the 13th of October. And Christian K0STH says it's time to get outside and enjoy the outdoors and enjoy the radio. So there's all kinds of giveaways, some prizes, and some points involved this time. So we're not going to get into all the details here, but you can find out. But we're going to tell you where to find all those details. It's 100wattsinawire.com/activities. So be sure to check that out. Well, get your questions ready to go for Joe and Michelle. If you're listening to us live on Thursday night, you'll be able to give us a call after the interview. Let me give you the telephone number so you can write that down and have it ready to go. It's not time to call just yet, but let me give you that number. It's 812-638-4261. That's 812-NET-HAM1. You can also tweet us. It's at Ham Talk Live on Twitter. We'll be watching that as the night goes on. So I'll be back with Michelle and Joe right after this word from Tower Electronics right here on Ham Talk Live.
Thank you for a lovely dinner.
Aren't you going to ask me in to solder some PL259s?
Well, I do have some from Tower Electronics.
How can I refuse?
Consider the sophisticated quality of PL259s from Tower Electronics. From soldering supplies to adapters, connectors to cables, and all types of connectors. Tower Electronics has the parts you're looking for.
Well?
Just one more connector? You know I love your PL259s.
Then by all means, take some with you.
Don't be caught without PL259s. Visit Tower Electronics at a Hamfest near you, or visit them online anytime at pl-259.com or call 920-435-2973. They also have ham sticks, mobile antennas, and meters too. See the whole catalog. Go to pl-259.com. Tower Electronics, the ham's dime store since 1978.
Ham Talk Live. Who is the most dangerous person in the world? A ham with some wire, a potato gun, and an idea.
Thanks to Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show again tonight. It's Hamfest season again. It's September 28th this weekend. They'll be in Sweetwater, Tennessee. And then October 4th and 5th, they'll be in Belton, Texas. October 12th, they'll be in Chickasaw, Alabama. And October 19th, Greenville, Tennessee. But you can find them anytime, anywhere at pl-259.com. Joining us tonight is Michelle Patnode, W3 MVP. She is the ARRL Communications content producer. She's the co-host, editor, and producer of the So Now What podcast. She co-hosts the show with Joe Carcia, NJ1Q, the W1AW station manager and ARRL lab member. Both Michelle and Joe work at ARRL headquarters and reside in the general area of Newington, Connecticut, and together they work through questions for new and returning hams every other week on So Now What? So, Joe and Michelle, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you to the listening audience out there.
Hi, Neil. Thank you so much for having us on your show.
And just we had this discussion before that we went to air tonight that, you know, yes, Joe and Michelle are going to be their jovial, normal selves tonight. So who knows what we'll talk about. So
that's why this is good. It's just audio, right, Michelle? Yes,
agreed.
Yes.
We like to have fun on the podcast, and someday we're planning on releasing a gag reel of all the stuff that goes on while we're trying to record the podcast.
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. For Amateur Radio Newsline, we put together this presentation to take to club meetings, and one of the things that I put in there was a bit of a blooper reel, and so we would, you know, collect some of the bloopers that I've done over, you know, the last year or two and some of the other anchors, and we put it in there. And then we also had, you know, my favorite part, which was the World of DX, or as I like to call it, the World of Unpronounceable Names and Countries. And so we'd give people the script and they'd try to read it, and then we'd play it back. And so, yeah, you just never know what's going to happen. And it's kind of fun.
Yes. Yeah, I know when our listeners hear this, they go, man, that is like so seamless. If they only knew.
Only knew, yes.
there were times, I mean, honestly, and Michelle can certainly agree with this, and I think sometimes I'm worse. There could be something really simple we want to say, like soldering a connector. There were times when you cannot say soldering a connector without either laughing or just totally screwing it up. And yet, by the time you hear it, it sounds just like we wanted to. Soldering a connector. So
yep.
It's a lot of fun.
But tonight, you don't have the luxury of editing, so
no. So we will be good.
Oh, I don't do that.
We promise, but Michelle, don't let them know that our fingers are tied, you know, crossed behind our backs and stuff.
Yikes.
Yeah. Oops. Sorry, you did not hear that.
Oh my goodness. Well, let's dig in here and let's talk a little bit about, you know, what's going on. We've seen an actual rise in the number of licensed amateurs here in the U.S., but one of the issues is that many still are not active. They get their license, and then that's the last you hear of them or last you see of them, and sometimes they become frustrated and give up. Sometimes, you know, there's stuff going on, and I get that, you know. We all are busy, but you know, there's just a lot of, you know, stuff going on, but we'd like to see more people that are doing that, you know, that are getting active. And I need to reset something here real quick. Hopefully that took care of it. Oh, it did. Okay. Thank you, Jill, for telling me. We had some audio issues here, and it's the usual one, so I got it fixed. But, you know, there's just a lot of reasons why people aren't active, and so there's a push to mentor people and get people back in to the world of ham radio or get into the world and be active and stay active. And, some podcasts have kind of targeted that, like 100 watts to wire. They took on the aspect of the new ham and really geared it for that. And now ARRL has added your show to help out the newer ham. So tell us how that came about and how to find your show.
Well, Neil, this actually started a couple of years ago. Bob Allison, WB1GCM of the ARRL Lab, actually said, it would be really cool if we did a podcast. So one day, Bob and I went into our media room. We recorded a demo, and the CEO at the time said, this is cool, let's go with it. And as it developed, the podcast actually became Joe Carcia and I, and it evolved into a podcast for newer hams. And here we are of So Now What?
And one of them, you mentioned that mentoring, and quite frankly, that is the main reason. With everything you said, the main reason why a lot of hams, especially new hams, maybe not every single new ham, but a lot of new hams, they'll contact us and they'll say, well, I'm not seeing the mentorship I should. And that's not to denigrate the clubs out there, whether they be affiliated or special service or even just a local radio club. There was a lot of great mentoring taking place. The downside is there's also not a lot of great mentoring taking place, and a lot of hams have commented to us that they get their license, they go through that with the club, they go through the motions, and in a nutshell, and we're really not exaggerating this point, they are essentially given an HT and said, here you go. And that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be amateur radio. It's meant to be all encompassing, all the stuff you can do in ham radio. And they're not seeing that, or they're not seeing it at the level that it used to be many years ago. And we hate using that term many years ago, but it's true. So that was one of the reasons why Michelle and Bob actually went through this process of starting the podcast, was to say, you know what, we're seeing this coming in from newly licensed hams. What can we do about it to help? And that's one of the reasons why.
Well, how would people find the show and how listen to it? How do they get to that?
So you can find So Now What either on Blueberry, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or whichever podcast app that you use.
Okay. Well, that's easy enough. And so wherever you find Ham Talk Live, you're probably going to find So Now What as well. So that makes it easy to find. So in all of the shows that you've done so far, what is the most interesting question you've received?
Ooh,
Boy.
we receive a lot of questions.
We do, which is really great, and we really appreciate all the questions and feedback that we get.
Yes, and by the way, I should mention that we are at W1AW here. We just wanted to put that little, thing in there for Whiskey One Alpha Whiskey here in Newington, Connecticut. That's where we're actually speaking with you from. So just W1W. Yay, go W1W. Anyway, we're here at the station. Anyway, we're trying to be serious here, folks. Well, like I told you earlier, we did eat a lot of candy before we started this interview. But anyway, it's going to go downhill from here, I can tell.
She's laughing.
At least we're laughing good, yay!
Exactly.
And he's writing a note saying, never again, never again. we
told you we need editing.
Yes, we need a lot of editing. We do get a lot of different questions, and a lot of them actually come after the podcast because we sparked something. We've had a couple of really, really good podcasts. I mean, really popular with the listeners. The CW one, actually, just recently. The one on contesting. The one on antenna cables. Earlier on, when we had the one setting up your starter station, these actually generated more questions than we answered. So it's really hard to pinpoint any one particular question. Some of us will ask us about, say, the history of amateur radio or a particular venue with an amateur radio, something like that. But there's so many different questions that we get, it's hard to pinpoint them. But we do try to answer them the best we can. And if we can't answer them, and by that I mean it's a question not intended for the So Now What podcast. It's not a newbie question, or it's just not a question like that at all. We will actually redirect those questions to other staff members. So whether that be a question that should go to the laboratory or the ARRL VEC or to membership, because we actually get that. We get a lot of non-podcast questions, I think, because people say, oh, there's an email address, I'm going to send my question to it. So we will redirect them if necessary. But I would have to say, out of all of them, maybe the questions concerning coax. If someone narrowed it down and says, which one? It's got to be the coax one. It generated a lot of good questions, and I think we were able to answer them really well.
Michelle, anything to add there? Anyone that stood out to you?
I'm with Joe on that one. We really do receive a variety of questions from all ages.
Yeah.
But there was one that actually did stick out to me. It was actually a project that Joe created, the 6-meter dipole.
Oh, the 6-meter dipole,
yeah.
yes.
After one of our episodes, a lot of listeners wrote in and said, hey, I really want the instructions. I want to try that. Let's build it.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
The history behind that was a few years ago, I was tasked to, and this is just like when the podcast was still in its infancy. We were trying some new things, and I was tasked with building simple stuff that a brand new ham, especially one on a budget, because we know that's something that has taken consideration, but building really simple antennas. And one of them was a simple coat hanger antenna for 2 70 centimeters of satellite, which is still here in the foyer at the station and actually generates a lot of conversation. But the other one that Michelle is referring to is the 6-meter dipole project. And we wanted to come up with an extremely simple way of making a hard, using aluminum, 6-meter dipole that you can build using materials from your local improvement store. And we know that there's videos online how to do this, and there's instructions on how to do this. And so we figured, okay, well, let's go to the hardware store and pick stuff out and say, can we make an antenna out of this? And so we did. And we talked about that on our podcast. And I actually had written down the instructions for that. And it essentially is an extremely simple 6-meter dipole. You make it, you put it on a painter's pole. You can raise that painter's pole up if you have one of the extendable things, and it actually works quite well. And just after I built it, our CEO at the time had taken it out and used it in one of the VHF contests. Now, it was on top of a building, but it actually worked out well. So when people would ask about that, we would send them the instructions on that antenna. And again, it's something simple, and I think some of the more seasoned amateur radio operators out there would go, yeah, but it's just a 6-meter antenna. It's 4 feet 9 inches either side. But for a lot of new amateur radio operators, what we think is really, really simple to do, well, we all start out the same. It's actually difficult for them to visualize it. So that was a very long explanation, wasn't it, Michelle?
But it was very thorough.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Very thorough.
Very thorough, yes.
Yes.
Well, what do you two have planned in the months to come? What are you where are you going with this next?
Oh, that's a secret. No.
Uh-oh. Reveal this.
I think
Not divulge the content.
Without, we would have to do terrible things to ourselves. Well, as you can tell from our podcast, we try to be all-encompassing. I mean, one thing might be technical, one thing might not be technical, one thing might be social. We're
definitely.
Anything that looks like it would affect a brand new licensed amateur radio operator, obviously with a little bit of tinges of they're needing mentorship, but we get a lot of stuff from people, and actually she's pulling up the list of our upcoming podcast. So what do we want to say?
What can we reveal?
Well, we can kind of mention this. And and I hear it a lot at W1AW, and it's the old, I'm just a technician. And I will tell these licensed amateur radio operators when they come here, no, you're not just a technician. You are a licensed amateur radio operator. And you went through the same procedures as everyone else. So that upcoming podcast is not so much a technical one, but we're going to try to deal a little bit with some of the things that new amateur radio operators have to deal with, especially if they're brand new coming into a club. They're coming up against a lot of older, well-seasoned hams, and I think you kind of get where I'm coming from here, Neil. And so we just want to talk about that. But Michelle, anything else?
Well, that one will be released next week for October 3rd our next episode.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, we're going to get into like the ham language, the ham lingo, and really just decode it for everyone so everyone knows what everybody's talking about, because not everybody knows the lingo or the shortcuts for it.
Exactly, yes.
And that'll be helpful, especially just for newer hams or just starting out or a refresher. And we do have a really special one for Halloween.
Oh, yes, the Halloween special.
If you haven't noticed, ham radio has really been popping up in pop culture lately, especially in horror movies or horror TV shows, which is my favorite, so I have to put a plug for it.
And yet, but why? Why?
Right. So we'll be kind of diving into that and talking about the significance there.
That sounds like some good stuff, and I look forward to hearing all this, because it's one thing to come out there and visit, which I got to do again this summer, which was really cool. But
as part of the
get
TI.
on and yes, because of the Teachers Institute out there, and when we did the show from Teachers Institute out there. While I was there, but it was a great opportunity, to hang out with you guys. But you also, have a chance to share these things over the podcast, and I think that gives people more of a connection. It's easy to connect with you all when you go out to Newington and you drop by W1AW and you say, hey, Joe, can I use the station for an hour? Do you mind putting me on the 40-meter bulletin array? And you do that. But, it's not always easy to associate, with people that are trying to mentor, and I think this fills a bit of a gap, and many of the shows out there give this gap some attention, and trying to find new ways to mentor hams and answer questions and do this kind of thing and connect with people, and I think that's really important.
And on that note of mentoring, For folks who look at our Facebook page, they undoubtedly saw the picture last week that was taken of everybody in front of W1AW. It was taken via a drone. And part of that was because there was this staff appreciation picnic. But before that, we had the ARRL HQ Sprint. And it's a 15-minute, 2-meter FM only on Simplex Sprint, where there's zones around the organization. And it's a sprint, and staff will go to these different zones, and you have to work other staff, three only on each frequency. There's a whole bunch of frequencies, and we hand out these pre-programmed 2-meter HTs, and we had a lot of either brand spanking new licensed staff, or we had some staff that are just not licensed at all. And the point of it was to not only have this fun sprint, because it really was fun.
It really was.
It was fun. But also, we were mentoring non-licensed staff. And not that we're experts by any means. We all have to be open to learning. Every single one of us, even those of us who have been hams for a few years. That was me clearing my throat. So we had a really good time mentoring the new amateur radio operators here, but also the non-licensed staff. And there's a certain level of enjoyment in doing that, because you're able to say, okay, this is how you do this is how you do that. And oh, by the way, like for this sprint, come with me in my zone, because like W1 and W was considered a zone, and you can help log, or as long as I'm there, you can be actually making the contacts. And there's a certain level of, what would be a personal reward to know that you're helping somebody, you're helping them to help them for no other reason than it makes you feel good about yourself. And for a lot of the amateur radio operators out there that are thinking, well, should I help the newbie? Should I not? Maybe you should, because someone was probably there for you, and you got to pay it forward. And you have experience. They're looking for experience. They may be hungry for that experience because they want to have fun in amateur radio. And the best way to do that is to give it to them, because then that makes them a better ham. And then they become a really awesome ham, because everything is awesome in ham radio. And then they pass it on, and it keeps amateur radio alive and vibrant. We're we are passionate about amateur radio here, and not because we just play them on TV.
So, Michelle, how's the So Now What podcast doing so far?
So currently, just from starting this year and having our first episode go out in March, we're at already over 82,000 downloads. And currently, we're on iTunes chart for hobbies in the U.S. We're currently number 18 right now, and that's really, really exciting.
Very good. Well, it sounds like some people are listening, and that's the goal. Well, it's time for a break, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to take your questions and comments for Joe and Michelle right after this word from ICOM America right here on Ham Talk Live. Heard it, worked it, logged it. It's time to get the transceiver that's best suited for your lifestyle. ICOM offers a variety of high-performance and innovative products. Make the most out of contest season with one of these ICOMs today. The IC7610 is the SDR every ham wants. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out the faintest of signals, even in the presence of stronger adjacent ones. The IC7610 by ICOM is a direct sampling, software-defined radio that will change the world's definition of an SDR transceiver. It has RF direct sampling, 110 RMDR, independent dual receiver, and dual digicell. The IC7300 is changing the way entry-level HF is designed. This high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design will far exceed your expectations. With RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, a large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, and SD memory card slot. And, of course, the IC7851 keeps your competitive contesting edge with faster processors, higher input gain, higher display resolution, and a cleaner signal. ICOM's IC7851 is the pinnacle of HF perfection. It has dual receivers, digital IF filters, memory keyer, digital voice recorder, high-resolution spectrum waterfall display, enhanced PC connectivity, and an SD memory card slot. For more information on ICOM radios, be sure to visit ICOMAmerica.com/amateur.
Join the conversation. Give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Now, here's more Ham Talk Live. this is your announcer, Andy Morrison, K9AWM. Why else would I be talking like this? You're listening to Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Thanks to ICOM America for sponsoring the show once again tonight. Make sure you check out all their gear at ICOMAmerica.com/amateur. Ham Talk Live is live on the air every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at HamTalkLive.com. And, of course, we're not live on all the podcasts and on WTWW, so you can listen later on whenever you can. But if you want to listen to us live, it's Thursday night at 9 p.m. And be sure to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram as well. And it's time for your calls now. So if you have a question for Michelle or Joe, give us a call at 812-NET-HAM-1, 812-638-4261, or you can tweet us at Ham Talk Live. And if you're listening to us on WTWW or on the podcast edition, we're not here. So, sorry. But it's Thursday, and we're not there. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those challenges that being a new ham, we kind of alluded to, Joe did a little bit ago, but let me run through a few things. First of all, Laura into LJM from Western New York is listening. So hello, Laura, as well as Chris. Thanks for being there as usual. And Jill. And Jill wants to know if the podcast is done live, and is there a link that she can put into, she's one of the moderators in the Dayton Hamvention Fanatics group. Is there a link that she can share or put on the group whenever a new podcast comes out?
Hello. So the podcast is not done live, but there is a link. We do post it to our Facebook and Twitter page every time it comes out. So you could absolutely reshare it to your Facebook group. I'd be happy to send you an RSS feed link offline if you wanted something automatically to send.
Oh my God, imagine if it was live. Oh boy. that could be painful.
All right, so Jill, we'll get you set up here. And we got a tweet from the one and only Matt Severin at 8MS.
Matt.
Says,
Hey, Matt.
Just wanted to share, I've been enjoying both your podcasts, and so now what? Always learning something new. So that's what. So thank you, Matt, for listening and commenting in tonight.
And yes, Matt, yes, we can always learn something, can't we, Matt? And Matt knows what I'm talking about there. Just a little inside joke, if you know what I mean. So, yes.
Yes, we always can. There's always something to learn. I won't mention the big goof up that I made in the middle of Teachers Institute. Like, how to, assemble an arrow antenna.
Hey,
it happens.
We learn from our mistakes.
Exactly.
Heck, I make mistakes all the time around here. I haven't electrocuted myself yet, so.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this challenge, and you alluded to this before, and we've been talking about it. There's some comments of, I'm just fed up. I'm just tired of hearing all these people, bashing new hams and the radios and all that kind of thing. What are some of those challenges of new hams that they have to face?
Well, can we answer this one, Michelle? I can answer this one. Because I see it a lot when visitors come here, because obviously we get a lot of newly licensed hams.
Right.
And I think aside from the mentoring, again, we kind of mentioned that earlier, there's so much they can do. but what can they do? And right now, as a lot of us know, most of us know, we are at the absolute pretty much bottom of solar cycle 24. And it's extremely disturbing because especially for a newly licensed amateur who may only be a technician class license holder, not just a ham, but they hold a technician class license. So right now their privileges, if they want to do voice, place them on 28.3 to 28.5 megahertz on the 10-meter band. And unfortunately, because sunspot conditions are horrific, you go on there, you call CQ until you're blue in the face, and no one comes back to you. And I can see where a lot of these newly licensed amateur radio operators would be frustrated over that because I'm sure they're thinking to themselves, well, why did I bother? I can't talk to anyone. There's not as much activity on FM, just generic analog FM repeaters. So why? And to them, I'll say to them, you know, you're not relegated just to 10 meters. But if you want to be on 10 meters, in addition to voice, you could run digital. And I know that there might have to actually be this collective groan when I say FT8, but right now, FT8 is a decent mode to use, especially because we're at the bottom of the solar cycle. And while you may not find any activity on voice, maybe not even CW, because again, they have CW privileges as well, which we always recommend you learn CW because it's a fun mode. They could try digital communications. They could try FT8. They could try PSK31 or Olivia or MFSK16. There's a number of multi-mode programs down there that they can download and use. So if they find frustration in not working other amateur radio operators on one part of the band, go to a different part. And then, of course, you have all that experimentation that you can do if you don't want to just operate above 50 megahertz. There are a lot of hams up there that are working with mesh networks like the Arden systems. They're experimenting with their Raspberry Pis. I mean, I do that myself. I actually have a Pi that I will remote into, and Neil, I think we actually talked about this, to do ham radio stuff. So there's experimentation open to them. They can integrate Arduino with radio. So if they're finding they just can't get on the air to talk to somebody, well then investigate all the other stuff because there's so much out there. And you know, we kind of talked about this earlier before the start of the show, and that there are some radio operators out there that are just disgusted. They don't want to do it anymore. They're selling their equipment, and we can't understand that mindset. Now Michelle is a brand new ham. She has so much to look forward to that she can do. And for me, I've been doing this since I was a little kid. I mean, literally starting out in kindergarten, and it's still fascinating. There's still stuff to do. You're sending out radio waves, and they're cutting across the ether, and they're coming down in some other country or some place, and you're communicating back and forth. And I guess if there's some frustration, they need to find that passion again. What got them into amateur in the first place? Reignite that. Play with some of the other modes. Look at all the technology that's out there.
812-638-4261 is the phone number, so if you'd like to give us a call, you can do that right now, and we'll check the tweets here again, too. So if you want to tweet us, it's at Ham Talk Live. But totally agree. It's just there are going to be problems. Anytime you have a group, anytime you have multiple people, there's going to be problems. And we've run into that at school. Occasionally we get some hecklers on, and here I've got 15, 16, 17-year-old kids in high school trying to get them on the air and get them encouraged, and somebody starts jamming them on the frequency and take the frequency away and that kind of thing. And the advice is the same: turn the knob.
Sure. Exactly. And they have to look at the benefits of it. If an individual wants to get into any STEM or STEAM, because we have the two terms now, they want to get into engineering or technology. Amateur radio is an incredible stepping stone. And I'm sure some listeners are probably going, yeah, but it's kind of narrow in its focus. It says, well, actually, not really. I mean, look at how many medical advancements or experimentation are being done by amateur radio operators. Steps in, military, in high-speed communications. It's not a stretch to say many of the innovators, many of the movers and shakers in these various technologies are probably or were amateur radio operators. And maybe they got that spark for the technology from being a ham. Because it is, yes, it's a hobby. I refer to it as a service because, while it is also service, it is a technical service. But you don't have to be an engineer, but it sparks it. I mean, I was lucky. I got into ham radio when I was really young. I was always into radio. So when I got to college and was taking electronics, it was like, this stuff is like second nature. Except the calculus. The calculus was scary. And now my son, who's also going to school to be an engineer, has to take calculus, and I just sit back and laugh. But anyway, because now he has to deal with that. But it can just spur a lot of stuff in their head about what they can do, and who knows? Maybe the new ham now is the engineer in the future that finally figures out a way for warp drive technology. And I'm not saying that to be funny. I am actually mean maybe they do finally figure it out. Or maybe the ham now figures out a way to, oh my gosh, I could break the code in cancer research or other medical problems, Alzheimer's, you name it. And it all starts with being a ham, being an amateur radio operator. It's not that far a stretch. We're very passionate about amateur radio.
We are, definitely. Well, let's give one more opportunity here at 812-638-4261 if you'd like to call in or tweet, because we're just about out of time. So let's get one last chance here to chime in or ask a question if you'd want to. We're talking with Michelle, W3 MVP, and Joe, NJ1Q, from ARRL's New Ham podcast, So Now What? And Michelle, share with us a little bit about what goes into making an episode of So Now What?
And here comes the expert, because I just walk in from off the street. This is Michelle's baby. I'm telling you, folks, this is...
Well, thanks, guys.
She's the expert.
So what happens is we all come together, and that's David Isger, Joe Carcia, and I. We all come together. We discuss topics and ideas for future podcast episodes. Then David writes us script notes, and then me and Joe come together and we discuss it further. And we just go through it and say, what will be valuable to newer hams or anybody listening? Because from our comments, we realize too, it's not just new hams that are listening to us. Yeah, it's all hams.
We get a lot of questions from well-seasoned hams. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's really exciting too that just more experienced hams, they like what we're doing, which is great. That's our goal, and they like listening to it. So we come together, we think of new topics and ideas, and a lot of them are based on questions or responses as well. And we do have a media room here at ARRL HQ. Joe and I go in there, we record, and as we mentioned before, of course, lots of editing.
Yeah, editing. Lots of editing.
And then it's really just putting it together. I mean, I have the audio tracks, and we have Sabrina Jackson of ARRL HQ. Yep. And she's the voice of the intro and the outro on the show. So we have that track on there. I put everything together. We use Adobe Audition, and once everything is set with the metadata and everything, it's uploaded to Blueberry, and it goes out to Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and it filters through all the other podcast apps. But it really does take a lot of time. The planning process, the recording process, the editing process, but we're pretty happy with the end result, and we really just want to keep trying to make it better and hope it's helping everyone out.
Yeah, because we're not experts in this.
Right.
Although, in our defense, we did take podcast classes.
We did.
Oh, wow.
Actual classes for that. And we went, it was like 2 months or something like that. We went through a podcast training. And we did not say, throw that all out. We'll do it on our own. No, we said, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Right.
So we kind of took that into consideration.
Yeah.
No, we actually followed it, really. We just didn't take it into consideration. We followed it.
We wanted to know, the ins and outs of what to do for a podcast, and it was super helpful. And here we are.
Yep.
Well, I had some requests for you to come on, and when we talked about that this summer when I was out there, that we had some requests for you to come on the show and share a little bit of what goes into the podcast and the goals of the podcast. And so you did that tonight wonderfully. So thank you so much for being on the show, and
you're welcome.
Really glad that we were able to get it worked out and have you on, and look forward to hearing more from you two.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Neil.
Yeah, thank you very much, Neil. This has been a lot of fun. And I'm glad those requested us for us to sing. We could have sung, but,
Well, now, Joe, you could play, so,
I can play.
You can play. Yeah.
You play.
You could play an MP3 player.
Oh, I could play an MP3. That is pretty much the level of my talent when it comes to singing. So, listen to all Joe's greatest hits right now. So, no, we don't do that.
Oh, boy.
Again,
all right. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much, and best of luck with the show, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for the opportunity, Neil. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really great being on the show.
All right. Well, that is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. Thanks to my guests, Joe Carcia, NJ1Q and Michelle Patnode, W3MVP, and everybody out there in cyberspace for typing in tonight and listening. And I invite you back next Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at hamtalklive.com. And for a list of all of our upcoming guests, you can find that at hamtalklive.com as well. And if you like the show, please leave us a review. That helps others find us faster, and do the same for So Now What. This is a good one, and you need to let us know what's going on all of these podcasts. We appreciate your feedback. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and as always, may the good DX be yours.